So what I wanted to do today, and I apologize, I think today's topic is somewhat heavy, but heavy topics are good. I mean, that's part of life too. But I just wanted to start off by reading, sharing with you three very, very powerful verses of the Quran that all deal with the theme of do not be deceived by this life. And if you notice, what is interesting, I mean, this is a very powerful theme, and you see it repeated. And you see in these verses, it's almost the same, for lack of better words, flavor, the same style. But there are many different ways in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us do not be deceived by this world. And even you see this with none. I mean, just universally, people tell you, for example, people will say, and this is non-Muslim, don't be deceived by the streets. It may be, that life may seem attractive, but don't be deceived by it. Don't be deceived by popularity. But in general, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, don't be deceived by this world and focus on true success in general. So one of the most well-known verses in which Allah says this is the verse that's in Surah Luqman, in which Allah says, after saying, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, talking to all of humanity, Ya ayyuhan nas, ittaqu rabbakum, wakhshaw yawman la yajzi walidun an waladihi wala mawludun huwa jazin an walidihi shay'a, inna wa'adallahi haqq, fala taghurrannakum al-hayatud dunya, wala yaghurrannakum billahi al-ghurur. And believe it or not, this is one verse, but you could spend a long time just going over the gems and the profound message of this one verse. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His last revelation to mankind says, O mankind, talking to all of creation, ittaqu rabbakum, have fear of your Lord. This healthy fear, this consciousness that our actions have consequences, and especially those where it's obviously taqwa is being conscious of the negative consequences of our action. And then Allah says, after saying have taqwa, He says, fear a day. Wakhshaw yawman la yajzi. So have taqwa of Allah, and then fear a day when no father will avail his son. And that's the job of parents, right? Especially a father, to protect. But no matter the physical strength, the status or whatever, no father will avail his son, nor will a son avail his father at all. Indeed, the promise of Allah is true. So here you see the beginning, Allah is talking about this life has a purpose, that there is a day of judgment, that there is a day in which you will understand success, in which you will know who are those who are winners and losers, those who are successful and failure. So Allah begins by telling mankind to be aware, have taqwa, and fear this day. And He mentions that no matter your status, no matter who you are, you cannot help anyone else. Indeed, this will happen. Indeed, the promise of Allah is true. So here is the point. So after saying this, Allah gives us this warning. So let not the worldly life delude you, deceive you, and be not deceived by Allah, by the deceiver, meaning shaitan. So this is true. You will be held accountable. And this makes sense, that our life has purpose, and that there is just like everything in life, there is a reward or judgment based upon what we have done. But obviously, we believe in the day of judgment, true justice, true success and failure will be gotten or achieved. So this is one verse. And again, I mentioned that there's so much in it, but just think about that, because really what we want to talk about today is how can we avoid not being deceived. This is a verse. And if this was the only verse, this would be sufficient. But there are several verses. And another verse, which is in Surah Fatih, in which Allah says, also speaking to all of humanity, Ya يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسِ إِنَّ وَعْدَ اللَّهِ حَقٌّ. Begins by saying again that trust me, this that the promise of Allah is truth. I mean, this will take place. So let not فَلَا تَغُرَنَّكُمُ الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا وَلَا يَغُرَنَّكُمْ بِاللَّهِ الْغُرُورُ. So let not the same basically meaning, the same statement. So don't be deceived by this life. And the last verse I want to mention to you is a verse that we're very familiar with, in which Allah says in Surah Al Imran, talking about life again in general and the reality of life, kullu nafsin dha'iqatul maut. Everyone will die. So again, talking about purpose, but what is the purpose behind life and death? وَإِنَّمَا تُوَفَّوْنَ أُجُورَكُمْ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. And you will only be given your full compensation on the day of resurrection. You will only know truly who are successful on the day of judgment and who are unsuccessful. And then Allah mentions what is success. فَمَنْ زُحْزِحَ عَنِ النَّارِ وَأُدْخِلَ الْجَنَّةَ فَقَدْ فَازَ. So whoever is able to be drawn away or eludes the hellfire and is admitted into paradise, فَقَدْ فَازَ. He or she is indeed successful. And then it continues, وَمَا الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا مَتَاعُ الْغُرُورِ. And as for this world, and what is the life of this world except the enjoyment of delusion? Again, so here, very beautiful. Allah is telling us that you're going to have to die. No matter how much money you have, whoever you are, you will have to die. But true success, true failure will be known in the hereafter. That true success is whoever escapes the hellfire and enters paradise. This person is truly successful. They get paradise, which again is a place in which our dreams are come true, our fantasies become realities, our desires are fulfilled. This place in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with us. There's no anger, no sorrow, and no end. This is what we are living for, and this is what Allah tells us about over and over again, and He warns us about the day of judgment, in which true success will be gotten. And you notice again, believers, Muslims are obsessed with success. You hear it all the time. The muazzin says hayya al falah, right? And you hear throughout the Quran, Allah talks about the قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. The very beginning of the Surah Mu'minun is that the Mu'minun, the believers, are successful. And over again you see this word used, and you in different derivations of the word success. So, and this is interesting because if you notice people who are successful, and you mentioned neuroscience, those people who are obsessed with it, those who have passion, are usually the ones who excel. And you'll find that many of them will say, yeah, since I was a kid, I wanted to do this. People who become astronauts, people who become great professional players, they have this obsession almost, for lack of a better word, maybe obsession not the best word, but they have this drive. And we see that. And believers have this drive also. They have something that drives them, something that motivates them, and it's this constant reflection and focus on the hereafter, on this land in which we are told that this is the land and the place of success. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us and warning us throughout the Quran, and we find the Prophet throughout the hadith are telling us, don't be deceived, don't be distracted from your main goal. That is true success. I'll mention just one hadith and then we'll open the floor to see, and there are many other verses that have the same theme, but like I said, in a different style somewhat, of we're talking about today. But I'll mention one hadith in which we're told that on the day of judgment, two people will be brought in front of the people, or everyone will be aware of these two situations. One is a person who was the most blessed individual in terms of quality of life, money, and all these different things. The most blessed individual to ever live will be brought and distinguished. And then this person who is to be destined for hellfire will be dipped into the fire just for enough to be said that he was dipped, in a blink of the eye. And he will be asked, have you seen any good? And he will say, no. And he will swear by Allah, I have not seen any good. He will forget all the pleasure. And this is actually alluding to one of the ways that we can protect ourselves from being deceived. But I'll talk about it a little later. So that's one person that will be distinguished as a person who will be the person who's most blessed, and he will experience the hellfire for just enough to be called an experience, and he will forget about all the pleasures that he ever experienced. And this is the most blessed person in terms of money, health, all the things that you can think about. And then the most misfortunate person in terms of, tribulations will be entered into paradise. So this person, in terms of poverty, in terms of trials and what have you, will be entered in paradise just enough to be said that he has entered, and it will be said to him, have you seen any difficulties, any trouble? And he will say, I swear by you that I have not seen any difficulty. He will forget all those 60 or 70, whatever amount of years that he lived, and it was difficult. You can only imagine the difficulty that he lived. So this is an interesting hadith too that the Prophet tells us about, to have us understand what is true success, what is true failure, and then have that comparison. And that's what I was alluding to, and we'll open the floor with this. One way that Allah tells you not to be deluded by, not to be deceived, is to compare, is to understand that this world, tell them that the pleasure of this world is little. And we see that. People drink, people do this, and it only lasts a little while. People have all these illegal relationships, and then they have the headache, and then they have the child support. Then you see it even here. So we're talking about life in general. So one way is that Allah tells us not to be deceived, because think about this pleasure that you are enjoying, that is obviously illegal pleasure, compared to the pure 100% true pleasure of paradise. قُلْ مَتَاعُ الدُّنْيَا قَلِيلٌ وَالْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ لِمَنِ اتَّقَى وَلَا تُظْلَمُونَ فَتِيلًا. Say short is the enjoyment of this life, the hereafter is far better. And you see this over and over again. It's temporary, it's temporary, it's temporary, but this is permanent. The hereafter is far better for him who fears Allah, and you shall not be dealt with unjustly, even equal to just a thread of a date stone. So, and Allah will deal with you, will not deal with you unjustly. So this is one of the ways, but we want to see, open the floor and see what are some other ways in which you find in the Quran, you find in Hadith, or that you do in order to not be deceived by this work. So